Taken care of, we can now tackle a whole number of mechanical and other practical issues. And the first thing was to find wheels. Now these are the types of wheels that I used for my first robotic drivetrain. This time I bought some that are a little smaller. They are around 20 centimeters in diameter, and I bought them for around €5 a piece at a local home improvement store. Of course, you can find these things online these days as well though. Now again, the rims of these wheels here are held together by 4 bolts. And I recommend you to look for those rather than the ones that are welded together. You'll see why. It's just more practical. And now I measure the inner diameter. That's 16 millimeters. And that means that we can just take a piece of standard stainless steel 16 millimeter round bar stock as our protective mask. With that being done, the next step is now to make a little connector piece that will connect the rims to the windshield wiper motor. And for that I have now bought these sections of round bar stock here. You could buy some 35 millimeter bar stock and try to cut these yourself. But well, luckily these days, at least in Germany, you can buy little, discs of this type that are already cut for just a couple of euros. And that's what I did. And here you can see that I want to place them directly on the rims. But before welding that on there, a lot of modifications have to be made. The first thing is that the center of all of the discs has to be found. And for that I recently bought this center finder here. And I'm scratching a steel scriber alongside the tool in order to approximate where that actual center is. After having done that, I mark that spot. And now it would actually be time to properly drill a hole through the center with a lathe. Now I have a lathe, but it's not operational yet. Well, we'll have to change that soon, I think. But, well, for now I will have to do it with the drill press. And well, making even a small mistake here could turn out to be fatal later on. So it's better if you buy more of these discs than you actually need, just in case you screw up a couple of times. And I'm drilling a 7.5 millimeter hole here. And into that hole we will insert a section of this M8 screw here, of which we will have to cut off a piece, in this case 5 centimeters. And after grinding off the edges, I'm now using my vise in order to force this little screw here into the connector piece. And well, it's really tough because it's an M8 screw and a 7.5 millimeter hole. So the M8 screw is actually a little too wide to fit inside. But this will ensure that the bolt is sitting really tight inside the steel disc. And after turning the piece upside down, it would now be time to TIG weld these two pieces together here on the back side, which I did off camera. The next thing that we need now, already known from the last video, is the 30 millimeter M8 connector nut. We mark it with a center punch. Then we screw it onto the shaft coming out of the gearbox of the windshield wiper motor. Now we need the drill press and use it in order to drill a 3 millimeter hole through both the nut and the shaft sitting inside of it. And this is what the end result should look like. We have a 3 millimeter hole on both sides of the connector nut to fasten the M8 screw and the shaft likewise inside. You can then weld the connector nut quickly and precisely on both sides so that these little tiny screws will not really have to bear the torque generated by the motor. But while you're still working on all this and have to align things and add things and so on, use these kinds of screws, because then the process is still reversible and you can take the parts apart again to correct certain things. And now the connector piece and the rim can finally be welded together. In this case, by just a few tag welds, I think they will be stable enough to handle the kinds of torques that we'll have here. And this is really all we need to transfer the rotation from one of the motors to one of these wheels here. But of course, this little connector piece is too flimsy and too wiggly, as you can see here, to act as a suspension. It really should only convey a rotational movement onto the wheels, while we have to build an actual suspension that will be inserted from the outside into the wheels, and that is what I'm going to build now. And you might wonder why I left so much space here between those two parts. And that is because this is where I will insert an encoder disc as part of a rotary encoder that will allow us to essentially turn the windshield wiper motor into a servo motor where we can measure the motor speed and control it in a feedback loop. But more about this later on. In order to build the suspension, we now need 20mm square steel tubes and again pieces of our 16mm stainless steel round bar stock. We cut off section of both of those. Then we cut 60mm holes into some of the square tube sections and we insert the sections of bar stock. And then we weld that together so that we get a piece shaped like this one here. The next thing that we need now are these 70mm flat steel stock parts here. And we again drill a couple of holes, and this is where we will install the motor itself. And now these two parts are joined. And maybe you can now already see where I'm going with this. It will allow us to suspend these wheels, but also steer. And of course, all that you have seen so far is repeated 3 times.